presentation, Dr. Michael Dowe and Donald Derr will speak about the use of electron-beam radiation for the preservation and safe keeping of food.
I was really excited when I saw the program and saw my former mentor, Edward Teller, was on following me. I was going to poke a little fun at him. I told, when Dr. Orient told me yesterday, I knew he'd been sick. I thought maybe he got well enough to travel, but no, we're going to get him by recording. So, oh, gee whiz, I guess I can't tell the story. And she encouraged me to tell it anyway. So, actually, those of us who were fortunate enough to work with Edward, I think all of us have several tens of stories about him. A fantastic person. There's a side of him that you saw working with him that you don't generally see, so I picked one that sort of depicts that. And one day, a group of us, Lowell Wood, Norris Keeler, Bill Barletta, and myself were sitting in his office. And Edward got a phone call, and he responded, yes, and my imitation of Edward's terrible. Yes, I will meet you in Dallas this evening, and I will be getting off the plane. Now, we have a problem. You have not seen me, and I haven't seen you. So that you can identify me, I will be dragging one of those little carts the stewardesses carry their bags on. But so that you can distinguish me from a stewardess, I will wear a red tie. When having come from the defense accelerator community, I'm sort of a neophyte in the food business. I've been looking at food irradiation as one of the applications for commercializing technology that we developed in defense. And I thought it really fair to this audience to also bring to you somebody who spent his whole career in this area to give you the real background on where things stand from a regulatory and a use perspective today. And so I asked Don Derr to share the podium with me. Don has spent much of his career as an irradiation authority for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, their FSIS, their part that works with meat, poultry, and fish, all those kind of things. Yesterday, Don and I were going to sort of divide up and make sure we didn't have overlaps. Unfortunately, it was Friday the 13th, and my secretary, who was supposed to have my viewgraphs ready, assured me she'd have them Monday. So we spent the time, I spent the time putting together some viewgraphs, and there is some considerable overlap as a result. But when I talk about the application of irradiation, I'll kind of go through that fast, and Don will give it to you in more detail. In terms of the background, next slide. I might mention that I do back up a little bit earlier than Don in my contact with food irradiation. When I came back from Korea, from the Korean War, I had, when they then sent us for basic training at Fort Benning, and it was very nice to go to the field, and instead of sea rations, all of a sudden we thought we'd died and gone to heaven because we got these little packs of beefsteaks and ham and chicken and chops, and These were the earliest tests the U.S. Army NATIC was making of irradiated food. This was food that was radiated at a lot higher levels than we're going to be talking about for practical purposes today. But we'll mention this, to the sterilization doses. And those little packs, I ate one that was over 10 years old at NATIC a few years ago. And there's no change, no deterioration. The NATIC, in fact, were the pioneers of food irradiation. In the 50s, they got a gamma source, and it was the tests with this gamma source that I had the luxury to experience in the field at Fort Benning. In the 60s, they got their first E-beam device. Department of Energy provided it. But also in the 60s, they were required to disassemble all food irradiation devices. The anti-nuclear people and various non-proponent groups succeeded in creating enough stir that the FDA banned food irradiation. And they banned it until more studies were done and it could be understood. Indeed, that might have been valid in those days. As a result, since that time, food irradiation has become the most studied and best understood of all food processing techniques, and far better than cooking, canning, microwaving, pasteurization, or anything else. The impetus to get back to food sterilization, or radiation rather, was picked up by the World Health Organization a couple of decades ago. And next view graph. And with that, the World Health Organization indeed pointed out specifically that there are no toxicological problems, there are no changes in the microflora that would induce microbiological risks, and there are less nutrient losses than in any other form of food processing. This latter point, as I'll point out later, even became a problem later because you can't tell whether food's been irradiated or not without some very sophisticated tests. Next page. Let me just spend a minute talking about what we mean, if you'll pardon talking a little bit elementary here. When we talk about food irradiation, we're just talking about ordinary electromagnetic energy, which can be expressed as waves, and we're constantly exposed to it from all sources: the sun, the UV or the stuff from our fluorescent lights. It's everywhere. We couldn't get along without it. With food irradiation, we're primarily thinking of the picosecond regime here, in which we use either gamma rays or electrons converted to X-rays. Here we want to be in this regime where the wave energy increases and we can have the effect of ionizing the target. We're talking about energies here of the order of 5 to 10 MeV. Now these energies are sufficient to do the ionization and create the desired effects. The specific sources we'll be using then are electrons, and we're limited, and I'll talk about this too, to 10 MeV electrons for direct electrons, 5 MeV electrons if we convert to X-rays. And although they used to use cesium-137, today cobalt-60 is the primary radioisotope used in gamma. There are over 100 radiation facilities in operation today. A lot of them are used for the commercial ones for medical product sterilization, and a lot of others for all kinds of material processing, to include cross-linking, surface treatments and things of that sort. There are some, though, that are dedicated to food irradiation, including one that's been operational for some time in this country, one that's going into operation at Stereogenics, and one that's about to be operational in Hawaii. Next. Well, I can certainly sympathize with Professor Cohn's experience this morning. Why now? It's been proven safe. There's no toxic effects. Healthcare costs are skyrocketing, and there are millions due directly to food-borne disease. We're losing 10,000 people about a year due to this, and death, not to mention the kind of loss that occurs just from illness and the loss of time and everything else. The environmental restrictions on chemical treatment also are really making it a very timely thing. The last chemical disinfectant, methyl bromides, to be phased out by the year 2001 because of ozone depletion. And so with agriculture, one of the our principal trade commodity, and interregional shipments hampered by lack of appropriate disinfestation procedure, it makes disinfestation by radiation very timely. Between the increase in the foodborne disease by pathogens and the need here for disinfestation to maintain our agricultural products, the time is right. But as Professor Cohen experienced, you get all kinds of reasons not to from these radical organizations like Food and Water, supported even by well-meaning groups. The Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago published the 10 contributors to Food and Water, things like the Rockefeller Foundation and so on. The 2020 and 60 Minutes couldn't get a single scientist to back the claims of Food and Water, and said so in their broadcasts. Nevertheless, whenever anybody starts to do something with radiation, the people are funded, they appear, and they create a stir. And it's sufficient to have scared the producers and the product makers. The consumer level, where it's test marketed, that's not been a problem. So it's really a matter of proper education and to overcome this. I think Don will go through this in some detail. Please. Internationally, the U.S. is certainly not the leader in food irradiation. There are 40 nations that have 224 food categories, working all the way from the low energy area of disinfestation to the medium energy area of depathinization, and the higher energy areas of spices and even higher for sterile products that you can ship without refrigeration. There are 32 nations that have irradiation facilities in production. As I mentioned, the U.S. has Food Technology, formerly Vindicator in Florida. Sam Whitney, who's been our pioneer, very colorful guy. And we have a small facility for tropical fruits under construction in Hawaii. And Stereogenics is now dedicating one of its plants up here in California to non-medical production, which will include food, and they're rather heavy already in spices. The actual leader is South Africa. They have some 82 products. There are others at the other end, like Japan and Uruguay, that only allow potatoes at low levels just to keep them from sprouting. Iran, only spices. The U.S. has 10 different food products with clearances. A good number of those the restrictions are written so that even though they're approved for irradiation, it's impractical economically to produce them within those regulations, and I'll go into why that is in a minute. I'm going to go through this part very quickly because Don will be talking about this also. There are a lot of foods that can benefit from these low doses. Pork is a good example for two reasons. Even better than the beef and the shrimp, which you'd want to go to about 1.5 kilograms. By the way, for the people who are used to rads, which is an erg per gram, they decided to go from CGS to the MKS system, so the food people use grays. A gray is 100 rads, or a joule per kilogram, MKS unit. So when I talk about grays, just multiply by 100 and you've got it in rads. Anyway, a kilorad and a half will take care of the pathogens and meats and poultry, but it only takes about a third of a kilogray to take care of the trichina in the pork and get rid of that stuff. To disinfest fruits and vegetables, you can get rid of fruit flies for about 0.15 gray and a kilogray, and most of the rest of the bugs for about 0.3 kilogray. Very low doses will take care of the sprouting, and higher doses are used to get rid of the some of the things in grain. Next. When we use medium doses, we can get rid of all the various pathogens, and at somewhat higher doses, the sterilization against the disease in spices, tea, and herbs. Next. The beneficial effects, as I was indicating, get rid of fruit flies at very low, other insects with a little bit more, spoilage bacteria higher, and extend the shelf life of things, strawberries, the mold that you see forming on them after a few days or to a week in the ice box. It'd take about 30 days with irradiated strawberries. They're very popular in Chicago where they're distributed. Molds and fungi, as I mentioned, low doses fix those. And all organisms, 70 kilogray, but we're only allowed to use 30. The doses, the effect of these doses on various specific pathogens and parasites, you can see the low level that it takes on parasites takes about 5 times that to take care of the usual pathogens, and spores considerably more than the doses to take care of the pathogens. These are the data that were compiled by one of our real leaders in the field, Dr. Thayer, who's at the USDA Research Center. And I might add that in addition to this list, which pork, which of course is at the lower D value because of the vulnerability of trichinae, and Vitrio in the fish are about the same level as these. The reason I put this slide on is to point out what Dr. Thayer has pointed out, that a lot of different things affect the efficacy of the irradiation. And it can include such variables as the condition of the host, the temperature of the host, the type of host that we have, and its suspension. All of these have different radiation sensitivities. And the fact is, though, that these are really well studied for radiation now, and we do understand them and understand the limits. I wanted to mention a few things about process control. I already mentioned that one of the problems is that traditional food processing leaves a trace. Radiation processing has negligible temperature change, no residues, and they have live larvae if you use real low doses, like the 150 to 300 gray, but they're totally sterile. So you can't get an emerging adult that can do anything in terms of creating an infestation. So this really ideal food process has the trouble that it hardly affects the food. There are no routine detection techniques, and so you have to use precision methods of control. The fact is, though, we use these precision methods of control already when we irradiate medical products and sterilize them. So this is not something that has to be developed. One thing it does not do is take good food and make it bad food and make it good. It'll kill the insects, but it won't clean up spoiled food. And it'll help preserve food. So the process has to be part of a good quality control program where you use good manufacturing practice on the food product. With hundreds of big radiators in the world used routinely here, with sterilizing products by irradiation, with oversight by the FDA, reliance on established dosimetry procedures. As I mentioned, irradiation of food is no problem to document. We also, the FDA itself uses irradiation to sterilize fruit flies for their release programs. So their use for quarantine treatment should not be prohibited or shouldn't be restricted. Now, the key to with irradiation is absorbed dose. It doesn't matter what you do with the radiation if it's not absorbed by the target. So we need to know where the radiation goes, how much of it is absorbed by the product. That's what pays off, and that's where dosimetry comes in. There are a group of parameters that affect this dose: the strength, type of source, geometry of the source, dwell time, how far the source is away from the target, how thick the carrier is in the food product, its density, and its loading pattern. And loading pattern we want to keep uniform in a run. In order to determine this, what we do is we place the dosimeter so we can do dose mapping of a fixed type of load, and we record that. And any variations are redose mapped. Any changes in the density, constituency of the product, type of product, loading of the product, boxing of the product, are all documented so that we do know the maximum dose and minimum dose as it's distributed throughout the product. And that's very important because the maximum dose and minimum dose are what are controlled by the FDA regulations. Some of those are unfortunate and lead to economic problems I'll mention. This is just a block diagram of a LINAC. This is a technology that's now well established. We can run a LINAC today 95% of the time, year-round, with reliability, with very low time to repair or loss of availability. There are 4 principal manufacturers of commercial systems. The first one was Hameson Research Corporation, AECL in Canada, Titan Beta in the US, and most recently IBA in Belgium, who've come out with a very exciting new product, which doesn't require chlysotron and is therefore potentially more easily maintainable, but it's still new technology. I thought this would be an interesting slide. This is the first, we'll look at this one. This is the, I mentioned the early 1972 irradiation facility at Natick. Well, this is it. It was produced by Hameson Research, and to get it within the 10 MeV limit, they had to deactivate 2 cells and then split it in half. And they got it down to 10 MeV that way. But that was the old early system. On the right, if we can move it over, is a later Hameson Research system. It's the one that is operational today in Denmark at Riisi. I don't know if we can show can we show that one? Turn that off just a second. No, just turn that off just 1 second. Will that turn on? Well, I wanted to show you a comparable picture of our, there we are. This is a picture of a gamma radiator, and despite what people, their suspicions about the design, safety and whatnot, they're extremely safe. They're safe against earthquakes or anything else the way they're built. And they lower the gamma source, raise it, and pass the food by it. And when it's not in use, it's lowered into a well. This is essentially the same type design Vindicator has. Nordion in Canada makes the most of these facilities. Okay, next figure. They don't have to be large facilities. There are a number of designs for transportable E-beams and gamma facilities where the farmers could bring the crops to some area, you move the radiation device there, irradiate that load, and then move it on somewhere else. Now, the effectiveness of E-beams is controlled in a great deal by the depth of the target. This is just a graph of electron penetration, and if the density is the density of water, specific gravity of 1, these are the kind of depths that you can get various doses. So next one. Now, in order to improve the dose that we get, what we do is we run the material to be irradiated by twice, 1 on each side. And two-sided irradiation, we get more than a factor of 2. We increase by a factor of 2 plus a little more, and this is just the empirical calculation that's done to show that. If we convert to X-rays, we can get a lot deeper penetration, as I've shown here, as a function of energy. Here we're, for the same depths in water at those energies, we're way up in penetration. The bottom line here is you get a factor of 12 savings in efficiency if you can use direct electrons at 10 MeV versus X-rays at 5 MeV. And this is a very tough penalty for the E-beam that came about as a result of a meeting of the Codex Altameritis in Europe a couple decades ago, where a couple of Belgian scientists claimed that at 10 MeV with converted X-rays, they saw some induced radiation in a couple of elements above background. Experiments that have been done since have shown that the variation that they saw is just within normal background, but nobody's ever done the experiments to overturn that or taken it on to overturn that. So today, when we convert electrons, we have to go to 5 MeV where the conversion is far less efficient than at 10. So if we get depth, we're penalized as opposed, with regard to E-beams versus gamma rays. The packaging for direct electron use can also be very cost effective, and Don will talk to that. Next. Just a brief minute to set the stage for a couple of economic statements. A gray, we said, is a joule per kilogram, so a watt, which is a joule per second, is a gray kilogram per second. So if we want throughput, which is the number of kilograms you can get through per second, that then becomes a watt per gray. So our process capacity, mass over unit time, is going to be this power times the efficiency of the process divided by the required dose to have the effect, depending on what pathogen we want to kill or what bug we want to kill. So for a 10 kilowatt system with a dose of a 1.5 kilogray with a 65% efficiency, we get 4.1 kilograms per second. And since a kilogram's 2.2 pounds, that gives us 17.2 tons per hour. And for 94% availability, that gives us 22.65 million pounds per year, or if we go up to a 100 kilowatt system, that's 10 times that. 200 kilowatt system is twice that again. Now, cobalt-60 can process 450 million pounds of meat per year with 4 megacuries. So we see that 4 megacuries give us a cost comparison with a 200 kilowatt electron beam system. Before I compare cobalt, though, I wanted to just show you the advantages, some of the these are the different things that go into the efficiency calculation. So I looked at 3 different options. One option is a small electron beam machine, which is rather economical, which could be used to just kill the trichina. And such a machine, because of the lower cost of the machine, you have a very low cost per kilogram to achieve your effect. To get the pathogens in poultry and beef, though, you have to go up in beam power, and the bigger machine is going to raise the cost to about 5%, to about 5 cents per kilogram. If, on the other hand, we can package it so that we use it directly, I'm sorry, this was direct. If we can package, if we have to use, I'll get there. This is direct. If we can use the direct E-beam, then we see we're back down to 1 cent or 2 cents per kilogram. And this is that factor of savings in the conversion from the loss of efficiency in converting from electrons to X-rays, where the conversion efficiency is only 8%. So if I compare, using that same baseline to compare the cobalt facility costs and the E-beam facility costs in terms of cost per pound and for similar throughputs. And the throughputs are going to be a little bit different, but the bottom line unit cost in dollars per kilogram gives you sort of the relative value. For a medium capacity cobalt, an E-beam facility, and a large capacity facility. Now, these costs are based on 91% availability of the facilities, which is true easily for both the accelerators and the cobalt facilities. The fallacy of this that comes into this is the availability of product. If you don't have the product to irradiate and one's idle, then your costs go up. The cost downstream, of course, for the capital cost is big on the E-beam facility when you go in. But after you start it, you use a wall plug for your fuel. So the fuel electricity is virtually unimportant. Cobalt, with a half-life of several years, you're constantly refueling. And that causes a continuing cost in the operating, in the cost of the cobalt facility. Next one. So in summary of these things, E-beams are more economical than cobalt if we have the throughput and you use a reliable accelerator. It has an advantage image-wise, although actual safety-wise it's not that big a deal. But because of the image and the importance, you turn it off, there's no radioactivity. You always have the radioactivity around, and people think of terrorist threats and natural disasters as being a threat. They think of transportation of radioactive material as being a problem in a community. So it's easier to license the electron beam for all these reasons. And as I mentioned, the fuel is wall plug and always available. Maintenance of the two is comparable. Most of them break down for the same reason, the conveyors. I was going to summarize, but I think rather than doing that, I'm running a little long. I'll get Don to start his stuff and give you a little bit more detail on some of the aspects nutritionally and regulatory-wise and market-wise, and how we can get this stuff started. Don? Oh, yeah.
This is just for the camera. Okay. If you'll just switch the light on back there, I'll be all set. Turn that one off and turn the lamp back on. Thanks, Mike, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Penner spoke earlier today about the need for the diversity of energy sources in order to assure us with the necessary supply of energy throughout the world. And a similar situation exists with food processing, in that many different food processing and preservation technologies are needed in order to assure us of a proper food supply. Is the lamp on the slide projector? And I guess we need to have lights down here because it's a long throw on that projector. These first couple of slides are sort of introductory anyhow, so let's go through them. Many different processing techniques are needed to prevent the spread of pests and organisms that cause illness, and also to ensure us with an adequate and varied food supply. And food irradiation has considerable potential to enhance the safety and quality of foods. As Mike said, I'm going to review the applications for radiation processing of food to provide a context for later remarks about the regulatory status of food irradiation in the U.S. and also issues related to the consumer acceptance and marketing of irradiated foods. And again, to review, food irradiation is used for food because it's safe at the approved doses. There are literally decades of research that have been done on by reputable scientists, and no adverse effects have ever been uncovered from eating irradiated foods. Let's see if I can focus that a bit better. Well, it's not working, is it? Is it okay? All right. As with any process, food process, chemical changes occur as the result of the process. And the products that are produced from radiation processing are called radiolytic products. These products are produced in very small microgram quantities, and all that have been identified have been designated as safe. Also, the effects on nutrients are similar to other processes. There is no significant effect on macronutrients, on proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and the effects on vitamins are similar to other processes. Scientific groups in the U.S. and all over the world endorse the safety and wholesomeness of irradiated foods. The American Medical Association, the American Dietetics Association, the American Veterinary Medical Association, the Institute of Food Technologists, the World Health Organization, the Food and Drug Administration, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the Codex Alimentarius Commission, and regulatory bodies in over 40 countries have endorsed the use of the process. And not only is the process safe, but it is effective. And that effect, as Mike mentioned, is related to the dose or the amount of energy absorbed by the food. This slide gives an example of the energy ranges and their effects. The sprouting of vegetables goes from the down, this is in rads incidentally and not grays, so it gives you an indication of the range in which each of these, the effect of sprouting, the effect on insects, on bacteria, and viruses, and finally on nutrients. And you can see that the effect, the dose needed to affect nutrients significantly, vitamins, etc., is several orders of magnitude higher than the highest dose that is intended for foods. And again, to briefly talk about the different ranges, the low-dose uses or low-dose area is used to sterilize or kill insects, inhibit sprouting in vegetables and fruits, delay ripening, and also to inactivate parasites in food. Medium doses from 1 to 10 kilogray are used to extend shelf life by killing spoilage bacteria and prevent food-borne illness by controlling pathogenic bacteria in seafood, meat, poultry, and eggs, and also kill fungi in fruits. And lastly, high doses are used to sterilize foods by killing all bacteria, providing shelf-stable foods of much better quality than provided by traditional canning processes. Government officials, the academic community, and many industry representatives share the opinion that radiation processing may be one solution to agricultural protection and food safety problems that exist throughout the world. Quarantine restrictions are imposed by the U.S. and some other countries to prevent the introduction of harmful agricultural pests into uninfested areas. This slide shows some fruit flies ovipositing on the skin of a piece of citrus fruit. I know California is conscious of the threat of fruit flies, and it turns out this year that Florida is also being threatened by that problem. Traditional quarantine treatments include chemical fumigations, vapor heat treatments, cold treatments, and the establishment of pest-free zones using sterilized pests. However, chemical fumigation methods are getting fewer and fewer in availability. The use of ethylene dibromide was prohibited by Japan and the U.S. back in 1984, and as Mike mentioned, methyl bromide is to be phased out by the year 2001. And heat and cold treatments are not always totally effective in destroying insects. So irradiation provides an excellent alternative. It reduces processing delays by allowing the fruits to be processed in a continuous mode rather than a batch mode, and it also permits processing in the final package that minimizes the opportunity for reinfestation. And finally, it addresses the growing concern about chemical residues in the food and in the environment. Contamination of produce with pathogenic microorganisms is another emerging problem. Organisms such as Cryptosporidia and Cyclospora have been found in several different kinds of produce in recent years. In 1996, there was a significant outbreak that was traced to Guatemalan raspberries, and that really brought this threat into focus to the U.S. public. A Minnesota epidemiologist at the time predicted additional outbreaks in future years, and it has indeed come to pass. This year, there have been over 100 cases of contaminated fruits or of illness caused by Cyclospora in fruits that have been traced to Guatemalan raspberries again, and also to lettuce in Florida. But here again, irradiation at low doses that have already been approved should virtually wipe out these microorganisms. And lastly, the shelf life of many fresh fruits and vegetables is short because of physiological changes or damage by fungi that affect their marketability. Sprouting of onions and potatoes can be delayed several months by irradiation at low doses already approved. And the growth of mold on strawberries can be delayed for several weeks by irradiation at medium doses. This shows a control group of strawberries after several weeks of storage, totally covered by mold. At 50 kilorad or a half a kilogray, there's some mold forming. At 1 kilogray, there's virtually none. At 2, the freshness is assured for more than 4 weeks. But more important to the public in recent years has been the threat of food-borne illness caused by pathogens on meat, poultry, and seafood. The pathogens of concern that Mike outlined for us, Campylobacter, hemorrhagic E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella, Vibrio, are widely distributed in the environment, and many of these pathogens normally inhabit the intestinal tract of healthy food animals. The outbreaks of foodborne illness associated with E. coli 0157H7, or hemorrhagic E. coli, continue to demonstrate that threat very dramatically. There have been at least 2 outbreaks this year associated with hemorrhagic E. coli, and epidemiologists again predict that new outbreaks will continue to challenge the concept of our safe food supply. And it's not just that these outbreaks are occurring more frequently, but the reporting process is better. To quote one of the epidemiologists, as we turn over more rocks, we'll find more things. Each year, these outbreaks lead to thousands of deaths, millions of illnesses, and billions of dollars in public health costs, reduction of worker productivity, and other less tangible costs. And irradiation at medium doses has been proven effective in virtually eliminating these and other pathogens. And finally, the 4th classes of foods that can benefit from irradiation are dried spices and vegetable seasonings. These products are grown in tropical climates that enhance the potential for bacterial growth, and their processing is done under very primitive conditions that increase the likelihood of their contamination with large numbers of spoilage bacteria and often pathogenic bacteria as well. When spices or dried seasonings are used as ingredients in processed foods, this contamination would significantly reduce the shelf life of those foods. So processors require that spices be decontaminated before using them in processed foods. Again, traditional fumigation methods aren't always effective and may cause other problems. Ethylene oxide creates a potential cancer hazard and doesn't kill all bacteria and molds in spices. Steam effectively kills the organisms of concern, but significantly affects the quality of the spices. So irradiation can serve as an effective alternative, reducing counts to a very low level without affecting the quality of the spices. Several regulatory agencies are involved with food irradiation, but the Food and Drug Administration is the primary regulatory agency involved. It sets criteria for the safe use of ionizing radiation on all foods. FDA's involvement in food irradiation is mandated by the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act that defines sources of radiation as food additives. Food is adulterated if it is exposed to ionizing radiation unless the use is in conformity with regulations under the FFDCA. The use of ionizing radiation on specific foods is regulated by agencies of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, or APHIS, regulates quarantine treatment of fruits to prevent infestation by exotic insect pests, and the Food Safety and Inspection Service regulates the implementation of the process for meat and poultry to ensure their safety and wholesomeness. The status of FDA regulations was static for many years, with only wheat flour, and potatoes approved. But in the 1980s, this began to change with a series of regulations that were passed. There was one in July 1985 that Mike mentioned that permits the irradiation of pork to control trichina, and another in April of 1986 that permits irradiation of all fresh foods to inhibit growth and maturation, control arthropod pests, and to use higher doses on spices to further improve their quality. In the 1990s, there were two additional rules passed by the FDA. One in May of 1990 that permits the irradiation of poultry to control pathogenic microorganisms. And then another that permits the use of sterilization doses of radiation on frozen packaged meat for use by NASA in the spaceflight program. There are also a number of petitions that are either under review or being contemplated at the present time. The first of these is a petition to permit the irradiation of red meats, again to control parasites and microbial pathogens and to extend shelf life as well. That petition has been under FDA review for a few years, and there's a good expectation that it may be out in the near future. And a couple of other petitions, one for the irradiation of shell eggs. Some of you may remember the concern that was raised about the presence of Salmonella enteritidis in intact shell eggs, and irradiation at under 2 kilogray would be adequate to control that. That petition is being written in the final stages now and is expected to be delivered to the FDA later this year. And finally, petitions for the irradiation of shellfish and finfish. There are a couple of issues. One is Vibrio species in shellfish, and actually shellfish can be irradiated at doses that are sufficiently high to kill the microorganisms, but the molluscan shellfish itself remains alive. So we could again eat raw oysters, clams, and mussels without being concerned about the foodborne illness associated with pathogens present in those foods. The Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service has a regulation that permits the irradiation of papaya for interstate movement from Hawaii, and is considering a number of other additional regulations at the present time. So far, one proposed rule has been published in July of last year that changes the minimum dose for papaya and also permits irradiation of other tropical fruits grown in Hawaii, carambola and lychee, intended for interstate movement from Hawaii. Until now, the Food and Safety and Inspection Service has been limited by administrative procedures and required to generate separate rules for each FDA rule that applied to meat or poultry. And for that reason, they have published two rules so far, one for pork to control trichina, and a second for poultry to facilitate that use. But currently, FSIS is working with the Food and Drug Administration to publish a rule permitting the irradiation of red meats simultaneous with the FDA rule to avoid the long additional delay in the use of this important application. So we certainly hope that comes to pass. There are several issues of importance to the regulatory agencies in dealing with this process. And certainly the issue of primary concern is safety and wholesomeness. Irradiation must not render food unsafe for consumption, but as we've said, the safety at doses up to 1 kilogram in all foods has been firmly established, and some uses at higher doses have already been established. And data to establish the safety at doses of greater than 10 kilogray is now being developed by a committee of international experts that's meeting over the next few years in Vienna. So there's hope that there may be high-dose uses that could be available in the not-distant future. Of course, irradiation must be effective as well as safe, and we've already talked about the microbiological effectiveness of the technology, and it must not adversely affect the nutritional value of food. And again, we've mentioned that there's no effect on macronutrients and little or no effect on vitamins. So the bottom line is that the approved uses would not and do not have an adverse effect on the nutritional content of a person's diet. An effective quality control program must be the primary control method for radiation processing of food because, as Mike mentioned, there's little apparent change in the food as a result of irradiation. And this quality control program must be fully compatible with good manufacturing practices and other systems to ensure general food safety. The labeling of irradiated foods is another area of concern to the government. Unlike other processes, when irradiation is used for food processing, it must be labeled. And this labeling must include the green symbol that is here. It's called a radura, and it also must be accompanied by an explanatory phrase that this food has been treated by irradiation. In addition, processors may add other information that provides factual claims about the reasons for irradiation. For example, a package of chicken or red meat could be labeled irradiated to control foodborne bacteria. One advantage of irradiation over other processes is that the treatment can occur after packaging, thus avoiding the opportunity for recontamination. In general, in the U.S., packaging materials for food must comply with FDA regulations, and materials used to hold food during irradiation are covered under a specific regulation. But current packaging technology includes the use of many new processes the use of combination processes such as irradiation and modified atmosphere packaging. And for example, modern resins are now available that can be used to create multiply co-extruded films and thermoform trays that provide moisture and gas barriers that can be tailored to specific food products. And these packages are increasingly necessary for the successful retail packaging or retail marketing of foods. The problem is that most of the materials that are approved in the FDA regulation were developed before this new technology. And in fact, more than 50% of the polymers used in today's food packages are not on the list of approved FDA packaging materials. For example, in 1993, when poultry was first irradiated, neither the plastic tray, this styrofoam tray, nor the absorbent pad that's in the tray, it's not visible because the chicken breasts here are, well, there's a piece of it right there. This is an absorbent pad that's put in the package to absorb any juices from the raw chicken. Neither of those was approved by the FDA. And although these limitations were eventually overcome through joint efforts of the FDA and the packaging industry, it did present a problem in marketing irradiated chicken initially. To fully utilize irradiation as a packaging intervention strategy, differences between modern packaging technology and the FDA regulations must be resolved. The FDA recognizes the economic implications of the differences and is willing to work with industry to resolve the problem, but what is missing is an economic incentive for the packaging industry to commit the resources needed to demonstrate the safety of new materials. Well, if food irradiation is safe and effective, we might ask why it isn't more commercially available. And part of the reason is a marketing challenge, and I think it's one that most of us in this room recognize very well. And that is, there are activists that object to this and are trying to have an impact on the marketing. They use scare tactics based on two deep public concerns. One is the anxiety over food safety, and the other is the fear of anything that has to do with nuclear technology. They claim that the technology is a government plot to use nuclear waste, and that consumers don't want food irradiation. But despite efforts like these, food irradiation is being accepted by consumers when they see a benefit. Several consumer attitude surveys have been undertaken that shows that consumers are willing not only to purchase irradiated foods, but to buy them at costs that are higher than foods that are not irradiated, provided that they're given information about the benefits of the technology. Also, there are several issues that are occurring right now that could have an impact on the use of the technology. One is mandatory HACCP in the meat industry. The other is President Clinton's announced food safety initiative that was this year, and of course the approval of red meat by the FDA. We're just about out of time right now, but commercial activity has been increasing. Since 1992, irradiated produce has been introduced. Irradiated poultry has appeared in grocery stores in Chicago and in Florida. Consumer acceptance is always strong. The volume of dried spices and seasonings continues to increase over the past 5 years, with over 65 million pounds of those products being irradiated in 1995. As Mike mentioned, it's likely that the use that irradiation of tropical fruits will increase in the near future. So the next probable market, I believe, is red meat, and I think that will be introduced within the next year. So I think processors may realize some potential loss of business initially, like the airlines when they first restricted smoking on domestic flights. But in the long run, sales will be recouped and may be exceeded as a result of favorable publicity of safer foods. And in conclusion, I think I can say that while irradiation is not the silver bullet, because there is no silver bullet that will take care of all food health problems, certainly irradiation has proven effective and provides a number of useful effects in foods that consumers will accept irradiated foods when they perceive a benefit, and that I hope that in future years we'll be able to make announcements of even greater commercial use of the technology. Thank you.